It's 2010. For the first time in 60 years, the US faces a threat against its dominance in the Pacific region. The threat comes from China, a country that has been fast emerging as a military superpower. In just 3 short years, Xi Jinping will assume the presidency of China and implement even more measures and projects designed to modernize China's military and make it a real threat on the world stage. But even in 2010, China was rapidly advancing, especially on the naval front, as it looked to establish dominance in the Yellow Sea, South China Sea, and beyond into the Pacific Ocean. Other Pacific nations were rightly worried. And it's that concern that led to a special event: the creation of a war games scenario that would feature the United States, Australia, and 12 other Pacific nations. Those nations would run drills and practice firing weapons, all aimed at a hypothetical and unnamed military superpower. Here's a hint as to who that imaginary enemy might have been. China was the only major Pacific country not invited to take part. This is the Rim of Pacific exercise, or RIMPAC, in action, and it's the world's largest maritime warfare exercise, held every 2 years between June and July, with the first RIMPAC being in 1971, before it became a biannual event, starting from the second RIMPAC in 1988. These war games not only allow the navies of over a dozen countries to get a better feel for the ships that they sail, they're a showcase of power, an exercise in demonstrating to any who might stand against these allied navies that they don't stand a chance. RIMPAC terrifies the Chinese Navy. And in this video, we're going to delve into what happened during the 2010 version of the war games, as well as cover a few of the later versions and explore the strength of some of the ships involved. We'll start with the operation itself. After 2 years of preparations, RIMPAC 2010 kicked off on June 23rd, with an official announcement by Combined Task Force Commander Admiral Richard W. Hunt and US Pacific Fleet Commander Admiral Patrick M. Walsh. As part of a press conference held at Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickam, they announced the 22nd version of RIMPAC, noting that RIMPAC 2010 would be a 1-month war game that was set to be the largest of its kind ever conducted in the Pacific. They also discussed the war game's purpose, the ships that would be involved, and the countries that would be taking part. In terms of purpose, the aim was clear: to enhance the ability of all participating nations to work together on joint operations in the Pacific. The two admirals highlighted military-to-military relations and interoperability as key priorities, noting that each exercise planned would see most of the participants working together to conduct weapons tests, sail in formations, and storm beachheads. RIMPAC 2010 also had the secondary purpose of demonstrating America's commitment to working alongside its partners to guide key sea lanes for commerce and communication. That's an issue that's been made even more important, as China has attempted to enhance its claims to territory within the South China Sea, a body of water through which up to $5.3 trillion worth of goods pass every single year. Keeping that sea open to commercial vehicles is critical, with China attempting to claim nearly full control of the waterway with its 9-dash line. Appearing on many Chinese maps of the South China Sea, this line extends from China's southern borders and essentially follows the coastlines of every Pacific nation that borders the South China Sea. It passes by Vietnam before curving around to Malaysia, past the Philippines, and up to the south coast of Taiwan. Crucially, the line encompasses both the Spratly Islands and Paracel Islands, 2 collections of islands over which ownership is disputed by all of the nations we just mentioned. To reinforce its claim over the South China Sea, China has been building man-made islands close to the Spratlys, with the 3 military bases both acting as a threat to the nations that dispute its claims and a means for extending China's exclusive economic zones, or EEZs. An EEZ is an area of the ocean that typically extends up to 200 nautical miles from a country's coast, over which the country in question has complete control. By claiming the Spratlys and Paracels, as well as building nearby islands, China is essentially trying to use this concept of EEZs to claim it should oversee the entire South China Sea. After all, these islands are spread through the center of the body of water, with each, in China's opinion, offering an EEZ that gives it near total control. It's these sort of claims that necessitate operations like RIMPAC. Coming back to the 2010 version, the operation would of course include the United States and Australia, 2 of the most prominent powers in the Pacific. But there will be another 12 partner nations taking part, including Japan, Indonesia, Colombia, Chile, Canada, France, the Netherlands, Malaysia, Peru, Singapore, South Korea, and Thailand. That's not all. Representatives from other countries will be present to observe, even if they didn't take part directly, with those countries including New Zealand, India, Brazil, and Uruguay. But perhaps even more impressive was RIMPAC 2010's sheer scale. All told, the war games included 34 ships from 14 participants, 5 submarines, 179 aircraft, and a staggering 20,000 military personnel. Collectively, these countries would conduct a range of exercises, including anti-submarine and anti-air defense routines, gunnery, missile launches, and vessel boarding. Mine clearance was also a key focus, especially given that China's navy has 36 ships dedicated to mine warfare, and part of the operation also involved an amphibious landing. Next, let's dig into the exercises themselves. Following the June 23rd announcement, the USS Ronald Reagan, an aircraft carrier, arrived at Pearl Harbor. There it docked alongside a host of other ships due to take part in RIMPAC 2010, where it would serve as the only aircraft carrier in the war games. This arrival kick-started Phase 1 of RIMPAC 2010, the meet and greet. Taking part entirely in port, officers and crew members from all 14 participating nations had a chance to take part in receptions, meetings, and even athletic events in which they showcased the skills they'd learned during their training. Don't underestimate the importance of this first RIMPAC phase. Given that a key goal of RIMPAC is to ensure that the navies from a host of different countries can work together, having this time to mingle and plan was key. Plus, the USS Ronald Reagan happened to complete its Tailored Ships Availability, or TSTA, just for this purpose. The real war games would begin on July 6, 2010. That's when all 32 ships and 5 submarines left Pearl Harbor to begin Phase 2 of RIMPAC. Once out at sea, the ships took part in live-fire gunnery and missile exercises, with 60 Minutes Australia even capturing the moment that an Australian ship fired off a supersonic missile as part of its training program. These exercises used live rounds. The Australian missile launch alone cost $1 million, and were designed to ensure that ship crews know exactly how to use their weapons whenever they enter a real combat encounter. The ships also took part in vessel boarding exercises during this phase, which sees crews from one ship board another for purposes that can range from simply taking over an enemy ship to extracting key personnel. While perhaps not as relevant to China, it doesn't tend to engage in piracy. These exercises train naval crews to handle situations involving the takeover of ships by enemy combatants, such as we've seen in the Red Sea since the outbreak of war between Israel and Hamas. More underwater operations followed, with minesweeping ships engaging in clearance operations and the crews of multiple ships collaborating on diving and salvage operations. The RIMPAC 2010 War Games wrapped up with Phase 3, which was more scenario-driven than the previous phase. Naval crews were given a scenario to confront, such as conducting an amphibious landing, and tasked with completing the scenario successfully using the skills they developed through the years of training. Collectively, these 2 final phases lasted until July 30th, which is when a reception was held on the USS Ronald Reagan for over 1,500 guests, while the ship was docked at Mary Point Landing in Pearl Harbor. RIMPAC 2010 was a massive success. The 14 participating countries took part in around 140 live-fire events, in which thousands of rounds of ammunition were fired from 20 surface combat vessels. 3 sinking exercises took place, as did 30 simulations of surface-to-air engagements and 40 air-to-air missile engagements. The US Air Force also wasn't left out. Its pilots took part in over 3,100 aerial sorties and were key in the vessel boarding operations conducted during RIMPAC. Add to all of this the amphibious landings. Ground forces from 5 countries, including Australia and the US, took part in 5 amphibious landings, with several of those including helicopter-borne landings. These landings saw 560 troops go from ship to shore, then back to ship again, showcasing just how efficiently the RIMPAC participants can land soldiers onto the shores of enemy countries. Best of all, of the staggering 960 training events scheduled for the 2-month war games, 96% were completed successfully. An extremely impressive percentage to round out a war game that sent a clear message to China. This is the naval power against which you must compete. With the general recap over, let's hone in on some of the American ships that took part in RIMPAC 2010, starting with the one that was the star of the show, the USS Ronald Reagan. It was on this ship that 40 naval personnel from Japan, Chile, Peru, Singapore, Australia, and Colombia gathered, alongside American personnel, to manage the combat exercises that took place during RIMPAC 2010. Collectively, they used radar, undersea charts, and high-tech monitoring devices to oversee both anti-submarine and surface warfare training exercises. The ship itself also conducted a live rolling airframe missile, or RAM, launch toward a similar target, the first launch of its kind to take place since 2007. The RAM is an impressive missile that comes in 2 varieties, the RAM Block 1 and RAM Block 2. Measuring 9.3 feet and being just 5 inches in diameter, RAM Block 1 isn't the largest missile in the US Navy arsenal. Still, it packs a lot of power into that small frame. It weighs 164 pounds and is capable of traveling at supersonic speeds, meaning it can move faster than the speed of sound. It also packs a 7.9-pound explosive warhead that's more than capable of destroying the anti-ship cruise missiles it's designed to intercept. As for the RAM Block 2, it maintains the supersonic speeds of its younger brother, though it's a little larger at 9.5 feet long and 6.25 inches in diameter. It's a weightier missile too at 194.4 pounds, though it still packs a 7.9-pound explosive warhead. As for the USS Ronald Reagan, it's a nuclear-powered multi-purpose aircraft carrier that's part of the US Pacific Fleet stationed in Yokosuka, Japan. Active since 2003, the ship is 1,092 feet long, with 1,040 of those feet being visible above the waterline, and displaces a staggering 98,235 tons of water. The ship has 4 propellers, a steel hull, and a steel superstructure, with it being large enough to house 200 officers and 6,075 naval personnel. During operations, it's capable of carrying up to 85 fixed-wing planes and helicopters, with its weapons loadout also being intimidating. Beyond the previously mentioned rams, it also packs a close-in weapon system or CIWS and evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. Add an SLQ-25A Nixie torpedo countermeasure system into the mix, and you have an absolute behemoth of a ship that's far larger than any Chinese aircraft carrier. For context, China's 2 aircraft carriers, the Liaoning and Shandong, can carry up to 36 and 44 fixed-wing craft and helicopters respectively. Of course, the USS Ronald Reagan was far from the only American ship involved in RIMPAC 2010. There were also several of America's Freedom-class littoral combat ships, including the lead ship from that fleet, the USS Freedom. Though much smaller than the USS Ronald Reagan at 378 feet long, the USS Freedom is still capable of carrying a pair of Sikorsky MH-60RS Seahawk helicopters, alongside one Northrop Grumman MQ-8 Fire Scout unmanned aerial vehicle. This is made possible by the Seahawks having foldable tails, which allow them to be stored in the ship's hangars. The USS Freedom displaces 2,862 tons of water and makes use of water jets rather than propellers for propulsion. This allows the ship to conduct missions in scenarios where there is a shallow draft, as it has no propellers to get stuck in sand or sediment. So the USS Freedom is capable of running operations in rivers and close to a country's shoreline, marking it out as a clear threat. The ship has a top speed of 18 knots and can sail for up to 3,500 nautical miles, meaning it can stay on the water for about 21 days before it needs a refuel. All the while, it's crewed by 40 naval personnel who keep it running, along with a pair of mission groups, each containing 35 members, to give it a total capacity of 110 people. It also packs a serious punch. Its forward-mounted BAE Systems Mark 110 57mm deck gun is a medium-caliber gun that can rattle off 220 rounds per minute, with each round being capable of traveling up to 9 miles, ideal for both airborne and shore-based threats. It's also remotely fired, meaning it doesn't require a human to point and aim, thanks to the Mark 160 gun computer system built into the USS Freedom. Add to this 4 Browning 50 caliber heavy machine guns and a pair of Mark 44 Bushmaster II 30mm guns mounted on the port and starboard sides of the ship, and you have enough guns to shred through an enemy combatant. Of course, it also has missiles, 21 RIM 116 ram cells to be exact, which are used for short-range defense against aerial threats and to take out any air-to-surface cruise missiles fired at the ship. Finally, there's also the space in the ship for internal batteries capable of firing up to 45 non-line-of-sight or NLOS missiles, which the ship can use to target other surface vessels. Those internal batteries aren't present in the USS Freedom right now. They were removed, likely because they were seen as unnecessary in the context of the joint operations in which the ship takes part, but they could be added again if there's a need. The final ship is one that was touched on during the previously mentioned 60 Minutes Australia report, the USS Bonham Richard. This is an interesting ship to cover because though it played a big role in RIMPAC 2010, it was decommissioned in 2023, with its parts set to be recycled for other ships. But when it was active, the USS Bonham Richard was a true powerhouse. A multi-purpose amphibious assault ship, it was delivered to the US Navy in May 1998 and spent 23 years in service before it was decommissioned. The ship measured 847 feet, with 778 of these feet being visible above the waterline when at sea, and was capable of a full displacement of 41,684 tons. Granted, it was a touch less sturdy than the USS Ronald Reagan due to its aluminium superstructure, but it was still a massive ship. The USS Bonham Richard could hold 102 officers and 1,102 enlisted naval personnel. The ship could move at a rate of 23 knots, making it fast enough to conduct amphibious assaults, and came with an impressive weapons loadout. Starting with a pair of ram launchers, the USS Bonham Richard was just as capable of taking out incoming cruise missiles as the USS Ronald Reagan. It also came with a pair of Mark 15 20mm Phalanx CIWS, one of the most intimidating Phalanx close-in weapon systems the US Navy has ever produced. Capable of firing between 3,000 and 4,500 shots per minute, depending on whether or not it's set to its dual fire mode, this 13,600-pound cannon is designed to absolutely shred any close-range aerial or naval threats in an instant. The ship also came with a pair of NATO Sea Sparrow launchers. The Sea Sparrow, which is also used by the Australian Navy ships that took part in RIMPAC 2010, is a surface-to-air missile designed to take out incoming aerial threats. It's a big missile, weighing in at 617 pounds and with a length of about 12 feet, and it's capable of traveling at speeds that exceed Mach 4. In other words, it can move at over 4 times the speed of sound, which makes it more than fast enough to take out incoming cruise missiles and most of the fighter jets China might deploy to take out American ships. Of course, the USS Bonham Richard is no longer in the Pacific Fleet, so why did we cover it here? The answer is simple. The fact that the US Navy can decommission a ship of this strength just shows how powerful America's naval force truly is. The USS Bonham Richard could easily match or exceed any comparable ship China has available, both in 2010 and today. Its decommissioning simply means that the US has built an even better ship to take its place, which should terrify China and its navy. But most terrifying of all is that these account for just 3 of more than 30 ships that took part in RIMPAC 2010. Now let's switch focus to a couple of ships that the other navies contributed to the exercise. These ships included the RSS Supreme, a Singaporean vessel that was commissioned just 1 year before RIMPAC 2010 took place. A formidable class frigate, it's not the largest ship in the world, but the RSS Supreme displaces 3,200 tons of water and measures just over 376 feet in length. But what it lacks in size, it makes up for in speed and stamina. The ship can hit a top speed of 27 knots, making it one of the fastest RIMPAC 2010 ships, and easily cruise at 18 knots. It can also travel for 4,200 nautical miles before its 4 diesel generators require refueling. And like so many of the ships that took part in RIMPAC 2010, it packs a heavy punch. RSS Supreme is crewed by 71 naval personnel, with an additional detachment of 19 aircrew when needed. It has 8 RGM-84C Harpoon ship-to-ship missiles, or SSMs, that it can deploy during close encounters with other surface vessels. But it's a true all-rounder. Anti-air defenses come in the form of a 32-cell launcher that can fire MBDA Aster-15 or 30 missiles, while protection from submarines is afforded by the Eurotorp A244S Mod 3 torpedoes, which can be launched from a pair of B5151 triple tubes that enable fast reloading. It even has a flight deck and enclosed hangar, both used to transport and launch the single S-70B Seahawk naval helicopter packed into the ship. The RSS Supreme has also proven so reliable that it also took part in RIMPAC 2020, a full 10 years after its unveiling at RIMPAC 2010. The final ship we'll examine from the RIMPAC 2010 is the HMAS Newcastle, a ship that was given a special mention during the 60 Minutes Australia piece. A guided missile frigate that was the last to be commissioned from Australia's Adelaide class of vessels, the HMAS Newcastle is based on the US Navy's Oliver Hazard Perry design. Like the USS Bonham Richard, it's been decommissioned since it took part in RIMPAC 2010, but that doesn't mean it's an unimpressive ship. At about 453 feet long and capable of displacing over 4,200 tons of water, it was a small and speedy ship that could reach a top speed of 29 knots and travel for over 4,500 nautical miles. And like so many other ships that took part in RIMPAC 2010, it's packed a serious punch. It came loaded with 4 different guns, including the previously mentioned 20mm Phalanx CIWS that showcases just how closely the US and Australia cooperated on ship design. Add 6 Mark 32 torpedoes, which could be fired from a pair of triple tubes, and you get a vessel that's also very capable of defending itself against submarines. Finally, there are the missiles, Harpoon Block 2s and SM Block 2 3A standard launcher, and a Mark 41 vertical launching system that can fire missiles at incoming aerial threats. And like several of the other smaller ships we've featured here, it could even carry helicopters, either a pair of Seahawks or 1 Seahawk and 1 Squirrel, which is a 6-seat twin-engine light utility chopper. With that, we've covered 5 of the 32 ships that took part in RIMPAC 2010. Next, we move on to the key question. Why was this massive display of power so terrifying for China? The first reason is the one we've already touched upon. RIMPAC 2010 showed China that navies from over a dozen countries could not only coordinate operations, but also bring very dangerous ships to the wargames. China has to sit back and watch as the ships completed their assignments with a 96% success rate. That showcases the competence of the ship's crews, which is a particular worry for China, given that many of its sailors aren't well trained in the high-tech equipment they need to use on ships, as well as the efficacy of RIMPAC 2010 vessels' weapon systems. Very few tests were failed, showing China that, should a naval war erupt in the Pacific, the US and its allies have ships on which they can rely to deliver the firepower needed to win. So the sheer scale of the operation was a worry. And even more concerning for China is the number of Pacific nations that took part in RIMPAC 2010. Beyond Australia, the wargames included Singapore and Malaysia, both nations that are engaged in territorial disputes with China over the South China Sea. Throw Japan and South Korea into the mix, which are the two naval powers in the Pacific that are most capable of opposing China, with both being part of the Trilateral Defense Agreement with the United States, and RIMPAC 2010 sent a clear message about the Pacific power balance. For all of China's posturing, the United States and its allies are still the dominant forces in those waters. Coming back to scale, we can fast forward to 2024 to see how China's navy would stack up against America and its allies. China looks powerful on paper. Global Firepower says that its navy is the world's second largest in terms of total assets at 730 vessels. However, looks can be deceiving. Though the US has fewer vessels, 472 to China's 730, those assets are generally far larger and have a much higher tonnage than those in China's navy. This was revealed by Forbes in 2021, which pointed out that the US Navy has a tonnage of 4.5 million, about twice that of China's Navy. Add in all of the nations that took part in RIMPAC 2010, and not only does China's numbers advantage evaporate, but it finds itself even more outmatched in the tonnage department. In short, the 14 RIMPAC 2010 nations can combine to field far larger and far more powerful ships to a Pacific conflict than China. Finally, there's the worrying fact for China that almost every RIMPAC wargame that's happened since the 2010 edition has been even larger in scale. RIMPAC 2012 featured 42 ships, including the USS Nimitz aircraft carrier, along with 6 submarines, 200 aircraft, and 25,000 people. RIMPAC 2014 upped the number of nations involved with 22 compared to the 14 of the 2010 edition. And in that case, China got to take part, meaning that it saw up close and personal just how powerful an alliance against it in the Pacific might be. Fast forward and we get to RIMPAC 2024, a wargame from which China was excluded, meaning it's once again on the outside looking in when it comes to collaborative naval might in the Pacific. This year's version of the wargame involved 29 countries and 25,000 naval personnel. With China being excluded, you could consider RIMPAC 2024 a demonstration both of naval might and the simple fact that more countries than ever are worried about China's efforts to control key shipping routes within the Pacific. RIMPAC 2010 wasn't the first of these massive wargames to take place. It also clearly wasn't the last, but it was perhaps the first to showcase the naval power of the US and its allies in the context of how that power might be brought to bear against a country that has a navy as large and powerful as China's. With 2024 bringing exclusion from RIMPAC for China, the country also finds itself isolated from a group of nations that clearly don't wish to cooperate with it going forward. That, perhaps more than anything else, may be what terrifies China the most. But what do you think? Was RIMPAC 2010 a successful display of America's naval strength? How do you think China will react to being excluded from the 2024 version, which also sees it missing out on a chance to develop cooperative naval skills? Share your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video. Now go and check out if Japan and China go to war, who loses, hour by hour, or click this other video instead.